Oh, we're up and running. Hello everybody, and welcome to today's live stream. So today we've got a single daffodil, which I kind of fancy doing a daffodil today because it's the kind of it's the typical spring flower, really, daffodils, and we have loads of them around here. But funnily enough, they've mostly finished here now, and I went out today earlier on to find some daffodils because they grow all up and down the road outside the farmhouse. And there was only one outside the house that hadn't died yet, and it was this one that I've got here. So we've got a single daffodil today, and I tried a few different setups for it. I quite like painting daffodils with light backgrounds because it looks a little bit more kind of fresh and spring-like. But I also took a few photos of it with this darker background, and this was my favorite. There's something about this one that I liked. There's a kind of a poetry to the light, and the daffodil is facing away from the light. So it's perhaps a little bit less typical a view of a daffodil. Daffodils anyway are one of my favourite subjects. I've been painting them every time spring comes around. I generally do a few daffodil paintings, and over the years I've learned quite a bit about the colours of daffodils. So I want to show you a couple of things. Let's have a look at we'll have a quick look at the photo in ChromaMagic first. So I can just point out a couple of things that I think it's worth knowing about the, mostly about the shadow colours, because I think one of the main difficulties you might find when you're trying to find the shadow colours of daffodils is that they're actually, you can see like the kind of the shadow colour inside the trumpet here. It's actually, this is like the highest chroma that you can get, the most intense kind of a greenish yellow that you can get at this value. So it's a middle value, the shadow colour, but it's very, very high chroma. And you can't reach these colours unless you use the right tube paints that will let you get that higher chroma. So if you use anything like a raw sienna or a yellow ochre, you will really struggle to hit the chroma. In the lights, we've got kind of obviously the highest chroma of a yellow we can get. But interestingly, on the radial petals that go around the outside, especially on this variety of daffodil as well, they're a lot lower chroma. So here in this kind of shadow area where there's just a bit of light traveling through the petal, it actually might be closer to grey than you think. You know, although the value is about the same as this colour here on the inside of the daffodil, inside of the trumpet, that's much higher chroma than this colour here. It's slightly darker. Okay. So that kind of gives you a rough idea of the general value and chroma of the daffodil that we're going to be trying to get to. How far we're going to get today, I'm not entirely sure. May not actually get much further than a block in today. We'll have to see how we go, because flowers are tricky. And they need, and kind of, I feel, deserve as well, quite careful handling. Lots of people here watching today, and that's lovely. Hello to everybody. Nice to see you all here. So I'm going to try and kind of build the structure, the basic forms, and simplify this daffodil down, because that really is the key to making any flower work, is simplifying as much as possible. So I've got a 10 by 8 ampersand gesso board panel here, and I'm going to oil it out. So this is linseed oil. with a small amount of solvent. I can't actually remember if this is Gamsol or Terps that I've got in here, because I've been using Terps for about as long as I can remember, and then I thought, well, I'll just try and change to Gamsol for a little bit and see what it's like. I guess partly out of a concern that using Terps might give me respiratory problems, and actually I found it's no different. And I miss the smell of the Terps too, because I like the smell of Terps. But it doesn't make an awful lot of difference. You know, there's just a very small amount of the solvent in there anyway. But now I'm wiping this back. So I was thinking about how am I going to start this painting today. And I could kind of just draw it out and then just paint it. But I think, not sure actually. I mean, another way to start it would be to coat the whole of the panel in something which is quite near to the final value of the background, and then wipe out the lights and then paint those in. You know what? I think I'm going to do it that way. I think I'm going to paint most of the panel about the value that I want. Try and get some interesting kind of texture into it, and then decide where to go from there. So I'm going to use mostly raw umber. I've put some green gold in it as well, just to let you know what I've got on the palette here. I've got lead white. These are both the same white. I've got two because I know that two blobs, because I know one of them is going to get contaminated with other colours pretty quickly and I'll want a clean one. I've got 3 yellows, mostly just so I can talk a little bit about the difference between them. So the first one is cad yellow. Now this is Michael Harding cad yellow, which is a nice good middle yellow. Cad yellow is generally slightly more orange. Unless you're using Winsor & Newton cad yellow, which is basically a full-on orange. I've never understood why their cad yellow is basically orange. So if you're using Winsor & Newton paint, you would want to use cad yellow pale. This is cadmium lemon yellow. The reason I have this here is because the cad yellow by itself tends to be a little bit too orange, and having a green yellow lets you mix between the two to get about the right hue, whether you want it more towards green or more towards orange. And this one is Bright Yellow Lake, which is an arylide yellow. It's also a green yellow, but it's less opaque than the cad lemon yellow. So this one covers better, but this one has higher chroma, but it's transparent. So these two, both of the cads, they're both quite opaque. This one is more transparent but has higher chroma. Then I've got green gold and transparent red oxide in order to, at the lower end of the value scale, like down around here, to be able to get those high chroma colors. And again, I've got a green and an orange, more extreme versions of what I've got here, an orange yellow and a green yellow, so that I can get the right hue, whether it's more towards orange or more towards green. And then our chroma droppers, mostly for the background areas, and then the outside petals, raw umber and ivory black. And I don't think we're going to need anything else in order to get fairly close to these colors. So this is, what have I got here? I've got raw umber, green gold. I'm going to put a little bit of ivory black in it, and I think what I'm going to do is get my spatula get some just raw umber. Let's try and get an interesting start going. I love these spatulas just because the marks they make are so different. So over here, they're so different from a paintbrush, it just gives something like a lot of interest. So I'm playing a little bit today. And obviously I wouldn't be able to do this if I had drawn out the flower first. It's slightly risky because I know that I need really high chroma on my flower. So there is a chance. Let's try putting a bit of transparent red oxide in there as well. There is a chance that I might not be able to reach the higher chroma, so I'll have to be really careful when I come to wipe this out. I mean, other tools you can use to paint with, this is like a big squeegee. Quite like this to paint with as well. You can just kind of load it up and, you know, get some fairly interesting things happening with this as well. So I just want basically a fairly dark value over this. I mean, landscape painters use these tools a lot to get a lot of kind of visual interest into the paintings. And it also keeps you from getting too involved in detail too early as well. Obviously this area down here is going to be much lighter, so I'm going to put that tabletop colour in there as well. Starting really loose today. Get some brush work in there as well. What's this? Nice big brush, Rosemary's Ivory Flat, size 10. Louise says, what brand is the Bright Yellow Lake? All my paints are Michael Harding, with the exception of the white, which is Rublev Lead White number 1. So the green gold makes everything go very, very transparent and kind of see-through, but it's good to use with the spatula because it shows up quite a lot of texture. Just playing a little bit with the background. It's nice kind of sometimes starting like this though, because it quickly gets you out of two things. It gets you out of like trying to copy the photo mode and just to start making some interesting marks. It gets your creative juices moving a little bit. And do a bit of softening on that as well. This is a watercolor wash brush. This will unify it a little bit without taking away too much of the texture. I want to go a little bit lighter here. So the paint is fairly thick. Let's add a little bit of texture around here, because it needs to be in order to cover. So I've already got like a lot of visual interest on the panel before I even start wiping out where the daffodil is going to go. So obviously this area here is deep shadow, so I've deliberately used like thicker paint with more black in it, which is a bit more opaque over here. The tabletop is mostly, it's lighter, so it's about probably a value 6-ish. For that, I'm going to mix white. Let's get that out of the way, we'll keep that for later. Some raw umber. So I'm trying to kind of create the atmosphere before I start to paint the flower. Thomas says, get you out of drawing before the session. Yeah, in some ways it makes it harder though, because now I've got to, you know, I've got to try and find the right place for the daffodil. But I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to kind of pull it out of this. Just about a value 6-ish. A little bit of transparent red oxide and green gold to give it a little bit of chroma, not too much. Needs to be lighter there. So this is going to drop the chroma quite a long way. So I end up with this, over this, all of this, you can kind of see that green gold, that high chroma of the green gold kind of shining through. Here I'm putting on a different texture, lower chroma, so it will hopefully feel more like light. It gets darker as we go towards the left of the panel. I'm just kind of wanting to open up possibilities really at this point. Play with the paint and get some effects. May end up being a 2-session painting, this one. We'll see how we go. I think that's probably enough to be starting with. Is it the one used in the kitchen as well, the spatula? This is actually an art spatula. They're probably exactly the same. It's made by Catalyst. No, Princeton. It's called a Catalyst by Princeton. And this is an 01, which is basically an inch across. Just silicone. Really nice for pushing paint around and getting some interesting effects. It's nice if you use it with cold wax medium, something like that as well, to give a bit of body to the paint, which you might do in later layers. Jacqueline, thank you. Yeah, I'm feeling a bit better. I may be, in the interest of full disclosure, I should probably let you all know that I'm on really strong painkillers at the moment, which I was in two minds about streaming today. So there's a really good chance that this painting is just going to go south really, really quickly. I've got about 400 milligrams of codeine in my system at the moment because I fell off my motorbike at the weekend and bashed up my side. I know I shouldn't do it, I know. Too old for that kind of nonsense, but you only live once, right? I kind of feel like that's looking quite nice already. It's not a... It already has this kind of a bit of a mood and atmosphere to it, doesn't it? Yeah, so if I might zone out a bit more than usual today. Whilst I was setting up the stream, I actually fell asleep at my desk. So if it goes really quiet and I'm not and you don't see me, I don't say anything for a while, I might have dozed off in the corner of the studio and left the cameras running, which would be a bit embarrassing, wouldn't it? Well, a pretty good start, I think. What do you reckon? We've got something going on, haven't we? I think maybe this needs to come down a little bit lower, does it? Or should we just play with it and see? Let's just play with it and see. But I think I'm just thinking about like what I want to be happening behind the glass. I want this to be very soft transition here. And there's a suggestion of some light here, so maybe I'll bring in a little bit of this. Just maybe just here. And then drag it in. Of course, I'm just delaying the part where I have to actually decide where the daffodil goes and to wipe it out. Thank you, Joel. That's very nice to say. Yeah, true. Elizabeth says you have to take care of you. This is true. And riding motorbikes around the green lanes of the UK may not be the safest thing to do. But at the same time, it keeps you young. You know, I'm 60 this year. And I don't want to go old yet. Thank you, Jacqueline. Jacqueline says I should just do a quick painting and go off to the couch. I don't think this is going to be quick painting today. I think it's better to do something which you feel fired up by, even if I end up going a little bit longer than I should today. So simplification. First, I've got to remove the areas where I need to put on those high chroma colors, because if I paint them into this background, obviously it will mix with what's there, and the painting will, the paint just won't take, and I won't get the chroma that I need. So whether the drawing is going to be perfect today, it doesn't bother me too much. I'm just going to start wiping out where I think the daffodil needs to go. I expect this not to be particularly accurate at this stage. I'm not sure I'm terribly concerned about that, really. So this is just kitchen roll, just so I can kind of, if I can get that, the main trumpet in at about the right size and about the right place, I think I'll be close, because I can relate everything to that. So this is actually shadow, but I do need to wipe it out, because I need high chroma there. I need the highest chroma that I can get, really. And then the body of the trumpet would be about here. So what I tend to do is I get the edge of the kitchen roll and I twist it round so I get almost like a point that I can draw with. And it being hard to control is sort of part of the point. You know, sort of takes you away from trying to make a perfect rendition. It's like this, to me, this particular daffodil has a bit of a, almost like a kind of a mystery to it. It's a spring flower, but with almost an element of kind of sadness to it as well. That's gone too low, I think. So I will get, this is another Rosemary's brush. This is, but I won't use that one actually. Use this one. What's this one? This is I don't know, found this in Jackson's the other day. Calia Angle Shader. So it's good to have some of that background colour, because this, I think, went a little bit too low. I'll see if I might be able to use some of the lovely effects you get with the wipeouts. Keep some of it as part of the painting, maybe in the radial leaves. And I think because this particular daffodil does have that kind of just a tinge of sadness, or I don't know if sadness is the right word. It's a very atmospheric reference photo, and I think I'm sort of responding to that as well as to be honest, I suppose feeling slightly sad about a lot of the things that are happening in the world at the moment. I'm not really in the mood for making happy paintings right now. And this wipeout technique, it gives you a kind of a softness and a gentleness which seems, and a kind of poetry almost to the marks, which seems entirely appropriate given this subject. So let's make a couple of little marks for where the bottle is going to go. Probably the base of it will be about here, just where you see that light coming through. Highlight there. Another one around here. The main highlight. And there probably. Just some little reference marks so I can get an idea of where it's going to be. This is starting to look like there's a painter I'm really fond of. His work. He was a kind of a symbolist painter really, but sometimes he painted quite realistically and sometimes not so much. Called Jan Manx. Janmankes. And his paintings have a real kind of an emotional impact for me. I mean, he painted flowers a lot too. And I wonder if this painting may end up with something of an echo, a kind of a bit of an echo of... I'm going to leave these petals here fairly... as they are, like a wipeout for the moment. Has a nice effect. Is it about the right size? I think so. I think it's about right. I'll put his name in the chat. Really beautiful paintings, I think. I've been looking at his work for a long time. They're kind of somewhere between like a dream state and reality. Mario says, for this kind of drawing, instead of paper, I suggest cotton swabs for ears. Yeah, earbuds. What they call them in America, Q-tips. I keep meaning to get some because I've taught this technique for quite a lot of my workshops, and people often say, yeah, I find Q-tips give me more control. So that's a good shout. Thanks, Marius. And this is where you kind of, it's like deciding, do I keep the background as it is? If I notice a drawing mistake, or do I decide to change it? And I'm going to start to put some colour on and mix up some colours. So I feel very much that this one is going to go, like paintings go in a different direction. Sometimes I paint things pretty straight, literal. Other times, there seems to be a more of an, it's hard to put into words, but an atmosphere about them, an emotional sort of content to them. I have a feeling this one is going to be more one of those. Let's put a mark in for where the bottom of the glass is. It's going to be like down about here. Yeah. I just love the kind of the mystery of this dark, vague background. That probably needs to come around a little further. And it almost looks like that, you know, it's like you can almost see the glass there already. Just suggested. Might not need much more than that. As I say, I'm probably going to do more than one session on this. I can usually tell, like, early on if I feel like a painting's going to go somewhere, or if it just might not. And this one is already feeling like one of those ones that might go somewhere just because very interesting things happened in the first... How long have I been live? Half an hour. I'm going to have to... beg your indulgence on this one because I guess this is going to be one of those streams where it's more I'm just painting something and less I'm teaching a specific thing. But then maybe this is useful to see something which is a bit more kind of worked out on the fly. Sometimes I do demo paintings and they really are just demos, and sometimes they can be a little bit more kind of more personal, I suppose. I want to get a little bit of that green showing, you know, where we have the green here. I might actually need to put in, I need it to go a bit more blue. I'm going to bring out a bit of ultramarine. I'm thinking about the stem. And it is low chroma. But it's also an opportunity for me if I bring a blue-green in more there. Where's it going to go? It won't be obvious, but it's just a suggestion of some slightly different, a different color world. Red, white. Establish the value range by putting a highlight in. Probably too early to get involved in the bottle, but I'm going with it. If I can have it start to appear at this stage, it just helps, you know, for where everything else is going to sit in the painting. Just suggest it a little. That's wrong. Put that in the wrong place. Got to take it out. Yeah, as Jacqueline says, I did a wipeout on a landscape painting and it was already done. My husband insists I leave it alone now. I've had that happen to me a few times. They just have a kind of a special quality to them, don't they, sometimes? You can already see that I think this is too high and should be lower, but I like how it's looking now, so probably won't change it, I don't think. Probably would decide not to change it at this point. I would never say be putting details in this early in a painting, but I'm just enjoying the glass and just seeing if I can kind of get a feeling of it being there at this early point. I'm wondering if it might help me. Or it might change, let's say, is probably a better way to put it. It might change what I do with the flower, I wonder. Colours. Let's switch to the palette. So I'm going to mix up a shadow colour first for the inside of the trumpet. That's where most of the chroma is. You often find that on daffodils. The radial petals are lower chroma and higher value than the trumpet. So I'm going to mix green, gold, and yellow. That's too much yellow. To cad yellow. It wants to be about, I'm going to go with the way it is on the photo, which is about a value 5, right? So this is way too green, obviously, if you want the colour to be anything like accurate. And then I'll mix another one with transparent red oxide. Now this will mean, as long as I get them both to the same value, to a value 5, it means that I will get the maximum chroma that I can possibly get in this hue at that value, which is a value 5. So let's check my value and see that I'm somewhere near where I want to be. I think so. Start off with the green and bring in a little bit of the orange. So I'll try to get as much done in this session, like as much of the painting kind of established as possible. But I suspect it will be a 2-session painting. So maybe next Fridays will be like, this is how I do the second session. And maybe some of it will be destroyed and maybe some of it will have some texture worked into it. Let's get this on there anyway and see how it's going to look. For flowers, I really like Rosemary's Angled Eclipses. They're almost petal-shaped anyway. But what I'm not going to try, or at least I'm going to try to stay away from any kind of, getting into the sort of the detail of the shapes of the flower at the moment. I just want to get in the form. I think it might be a bit small. I think it needs to come up higher. And then for the side of the trumpet, that's going to be pretty much my highest value, highest chroma yellow. I'm going to mix, for the sake of the opacity, I'm not going to use the arylite yellow, the bright yellow lake. I want it to be a little bit more towards a green. So I'm mixing between the cad yellow and the cad yellow lemon, which will give me slightly higher value than the cad yellow on its own. But what I'm worried about is that if I use this one, the arylite yellow, the bright yellow lake, it might not cover so well. Let's get a little bit of that in there and see how it looks. What's this brush here? It's another. I'm using all my rosemaries are out today. This is like ending up being a painting I'm using a lot of synthetics with. I didn't intend to use hogs for the background, but I ended up using this instead, which I think is nicer. So this is a evergreen long flat. It's basically a nice soft long flat synthetic. I really like synthetics for flowers. That's good. I was hoping that would really stand out. Every time I change colour, at least if it's a major change, I'm a changing brush. Another Rosemary's Ivory dagger. Now I want outside petals, low chroma yellow of a high value. So it's white and raw umber. And just a small amount of the yellow in. The value about an 8. A bit too big. So now I've got my two main colours are basically the inside of the trumpet and the outside of the trumpet, and then I'm kind of mixing everything else from those as I go. Virginia says it looks like the daffodil was zapped by the frost because the petals look semi-transparent and on their way out. Yeah, well, it is on its way out, this daffodil. That's part of its poetry, I think. We did have a couple of cold nights just recently, so you could very well be right there. That feels like too much. Mostly just playing, looking for values, but I'm also trying to be really careful of the chroma as well, trying to keep those those outside petals very low. This is the wrong brush. I don't really know like how much I'm going to need to change and how much is going to stay, so I'm trying to leave the marks pretty much as they go down at the moment. Because some of them may end up being kind of quite descriptive. I might want to keep them. I feel like this is too much. It's shouting at me at the moment. It may just be that I need to get some other lighter areas in to balance it, so I think I'll try that first. But maybe that it's just too much. So I've got so many yellows here on the palette. I'll just show you the palette close up so you can see. Like now I can basically, I've got so many like little mixes going on here. Light to shadow, that's the shadow from the inside of the trumpet, that's the outside of the trumpet. This is the light of the outside petals. So I can just kind of choose between them with what I think I might need. Starting to get some nice things happening, I think. Oh, careful. So I'm trying to use the brush in ways that are going to make the kind of marks that I want to make, at the same time as trying to establish like the values in the right place. I usually refer to this as brush calligraphy. And it's a combination of trying to get them down right and then, or close to right, and then affecting them afterwards where you want a harder or a softer edge. And So I tried to develop a more facility with this kind of thing through doing a lot of practice with Chinese brush and ink, which is really, really unforgiving. You've got to be so controlled in the way you hold the brush and apply the ink, because the ink is really, really runny, and you're putting it, oh look at all these little marks, you're putting it on in a very absorbent surface, so you can't change it after it's gone down, and you've got to try to be really exact. And I probably did more of that than I needed, but I credit it with giving me a lot more control over the brush than I used to have. Like strokes like that, where it starts slightly higher value and a sharper edge, and then it comes away like into this shadow, like I'm gradually lifting the pressure of the brush so I get a softer tail off. And I learned that is something I directly learned from doing Chinese calligraphy. It's almost like a kind of a meditation, which I suppose it is really that. It is a kind of a meditation. See all of these little fascinating changes of direction of the flower, and try to find them, at least get them noted in, like with as many single strokes as I can for now, and then once they've begun to set up and dry a little, and play with them a little more later. This is unfortunate because there's a bit of a radial petal showing on the outside of the trumpet there, but there's not enough of it for me to be able to paint it well, I don't think, and have it read right, so I'm just going to leave it out. I think I'm just going to leave it out. Pretend that it's not there. And even if you've got like all of these frills, like I've got here, around the edges of the opening of the trumpet on the daffodil, you usually find that the trumpet itself is formed like a hexagon. It's like a it's a hexagon section, if you like. And for some parts of it, the wipeout is working pretty well as being a part of the drawing out of it. My bottle looks kind of bendy at the moment. Let's make that all a bit more vague for now. We want a dark value across there anyway. That was nice. Come right in from the edge. So I was thinking about something someone said to me on Facebook some time ago about color accuracy. I mean, people say this kind of thing a lot. It gets a bit boring hearing it after a while. Like, why do you want to use an app like ChromaMagic, and why do you want to get the color exactly how it is anyway? And people use phrases like artistic accuracy rather than actual accuracy and all this kind of thing. But there are many ways to put expression into a painting. So the colors of my painting are not exactly the same. But any deviation in the colors in my painting from the reference photo is entirely accidental. So I think that you can also work an awful lot of expression into a painting by the marks you make, regardless of how close the colors are. You know, I try not to be too critical of artists who make very kind of absolute statements, because I think a lot of the time it's like a kind of a defense mechanism, because it's a difficult thing that we do, and it's hard to know whether you're producing anything of any worth a lot of the time. And you know, I think it's kind of like we tend to look for absolutes where there are none, because it makes us feel better about what we're doing. But there are many ways to work expression into a painting apart from just changing the colors, or, you know, making them more chromatic or whatever. This, I feel at the moment, I'm really happy with where it's going. It feels expressive to me of the kind of the mood, if you like, without being the color is close without being really literal, like I'm allowing, at least this is the way I look at it, and I hope this isn't just hubris, you know. This is the way I think about it, allowing the brush to speak, to kind of create the form, but also to hopefully add a measure of expression to the painting. There's a lot of different ways to add expression. Apart from, I mean, changing the colour, you know, is obviously one of them, and is a really beautiful way to do it, but it's not the only way. And I think sometimes artists in general are too inclined to be dogmatic about what art is. And I personally think that if you come across an art teacher who's telling you what art is, you should be a little bit wary. Because I can guarantee you that for someone else, it is something else, and they may be making equally beautiful work, just in a different way. And for this painting, at least thus far, I'm not particularly bothered about it, you know, if I miss bits out, or it's mostly about the atmosphere and the feeling. It could be a one-session painting for sure, but it might also go, it could go somewhere else in another session. I feel like this is too light here, but I'm worried about making it darker because I don't want to cut into my petals too much. I think I'd just about go away with that. Where do we go now? Sorry, I'm aware that I'm afraid what I predicted has come to pass, and I've zoned out, and I'm not keeping up with the comments at all. Totally zoned out with the painting. Let me catch up. Sandra says, is cadmium yellow the highest chroma paint? It depends on the value. I mean, it's the highest chroma at that value, but no, there are other paints that will give you chroma that high, but at different values. You know, like quinacridone rose, extremely high chroma, but at a lower value. At that high value, yes. I mean, there's. I suspect that my Aralide yellow, bright yellow lake is similar chroma, if not slightly higher, and it's slightly higher value. So it makes more sense to ask, like, what chroma can you get at that hue and at that value, I think, more than anything else. Oh, I'm really not keeping up with the comments today. I'm so sorry. Suzanne says, evergreens are my favourite brush, softer than hogs. Prefer that. Yeah, they are really nice. I might get some more. I've only got one, which a kind soul sent me, and I might get some more. Actually, Rosemary got in touch with me the other day on my website and asked if she could send me some brushes. I should really say yes, shouldn't I? Yes, please. I'm just a little bit wary of, I don't know. I suppose maybe being influenced by what I choose, just because someone sent me something. You know. Sarah says, Paul must be reading my mind. I was hoping for daffodils in clear glass. I've got a few, actually. I've got a few daffodil subjects that I'm thinking about working on. I just realized the other day that I'd actually started, I'm really embarrassed to admit this, but I started a course last spring, which was for 6 flower paintings, 6 spring flower paintings, and I just realized I actually have only done 5, and now it is spring again the following year. So the last installment is like a year late, which is terrible, isn't it? But I actually have the subject. I just haven't had the time really to get to it, which is a really shit excuse, but this last few weeks have been, let's say, challenging to say the least. I had a stomach bug, ear infection, crashed my motorbike. Still keep getting pulled back to the easel though. This just seems to be one of those ones that I just have got away with some stuff early on, which is still working. And I'm trying not to destroy it. And deciding what to put in and what's best left alone and not messed with. It's difficult to decide how much of the glass to paint. Hello, Del, good to see you. Jan says, how do you keep the poetry of your stroke without getting caught up in the rendering? That is a tough question to answer, because I think, hopefully this won't sound like I'm equivocating too much, but I think a lot of what happens there has been developed as over time as a kind of habits. And I'm not sure I can give you a really useful answer to that. I guess it's partly like which parts I choose to put in, and then trying to make sure that those parts that I do put in are, when I put them in, I use the brush stroke to describe what's happening there. I think a lot of it is just the softness, you know, and just really careful application of the strokes. I feel like that's a really not a very helpful answer. I think you need to have developed your drawing of form to a fairly reasonable level in order to be able to do it, because you need to be able to show form really economically. And then to choose a stroke and then try and make it kind of fill two functions, like describe a bit of form, but also be expressive at the same time, and deciding which ones to put in. I think that probably comes from knowing like what will show form and what won't. What will make the form read better, because it's not about copying the marks that are there, at least not the way I paint. It's not about copying the marks that are there exactly. It's more about, like, if I get this shadow in here at the right value, will it help the form to read better in the painting? So sometimes we'll do things that aren't there in the photo to help the form to read better. Sometimes we'll just leave things out because it's not going to help the form read. Or it just might end up being too difficult to paint, like this, to put in this extra little bit of the radial leaf petal that you can see on the outside there. You know, I'm just going to, if I try and put that in, I'm going to end up with a clumsy area here where it meets this part. So I would rather just say, you know what, I'm just not going to put that in. Because it's not going to help the painting especially. I don't need it. It would be an exercise in trying to get ever closer to the reference photo, which isn't what I'm after. You know, I just look at that and I think, I'm not going to be able to paint that and have it work. So I'd rather leave it out. I don't know if any of that made any sense at all, if I was just ballooning. I am genuinely trying to answer your question, but I'm finding it a very difficult question to answer. Oh, what a lovely thing to say. Judy says, I never realised how beautiful a daffodil is. You know, there can't be much higher praise than that if you manage to show someone something from a different perspective. Thank you for saying that. I would say for me, like, I'm trying to make this daffodil be a vehicle for something. I couldn't tell you what in words, because, you know, if I could put it into words, I probably wouldn't need to paint it. But you can create a feeling and an atmosphere in painting. I think sometimes it's metaphorical, to do with the light. It's to do with the strokes, the subject as well, to an extent, obviously. It's hard really to pin it down. But, you know, like I always end up saying the same thing. I think that's why we paint, because this is the, you know, there's something about the flexibility of paint. You can have a kind of literal meaning to it that you can't get in music, but you can get a kind of you can bring feeling into it in a way. For me anyway, like, you can't do so much. Maybe you can with poetry, so much with words. It exists in a different world. I mean, this is, from one point of view, this is not that different from the reference photo. The colours are pretty close. Everything is in pretty much the same place. You know, if you squint down, it doesn't really look all that different. But I'm hoping that it's carrying some kind of a, in a sense, like almost like an emotional charge. Do you know what I mean? That makes you feel something about how beautiful this flower is, or, you know, how I think this has a certain sadness to it. And I felt that about it when I set it up. And, you know, that's, for me anyway, that's kind of coming out in the way I'm painting it. I wanted to bring that out. And I would guardedly say, thankfully, like this time at least, it seems to be there. It isn't always. Sometimes just make a right bloody mess. Chris says value accuracy, not necessarily colour accuracy. Yeah, I mean, value is the most important thing. But even then, you can play with the values a lot, you know. As long as you keep the relationships accurate, you can still have form. Thank you, Janet. Hello, I'm Mighty. I hope I've pronounced your name right. I have a feeling I didn't. From El Salvador. Thank you very much. Angela says it has an ethereal feel. Yeah. Yes, sometimes I feel like in my best paintings, when something works, they always tend to feel a little bit ethereal, almost as if like there's a the world of visual appearances is like a veil, and by addressing the visual appearance of something in a particular way, you can kind of make it seem more like a veil of something that you can see something through. I better shut up now. I'm just talking nonsense, aren't I, really? Chris says, paint what moves you, not what you think will be popular or sell. Yeah, sure. But you can't always do that, though. You know, sometimes you have to paint something. Like if you take a commission, then that's a whole different ball game, you know. And I've recently decided never to take another one, having just finished one that took me a year. Anna says, I somehow, oh, I've lost the comment. Where was it? I somehow can't tell the difference between blocking in smaller areas and adding detail. Can you talk about how you think about this difference? That's a very good question. I mostly think about putting in the smaller areas as like the same as putting in the large blocking areas, but just at a finer resolution. Whereas some of this I'm actually adding detail, like the line around the edge of this petal. I would call that detail. It's not really blocking in a smaller area. Whereas these parts here, you could call them detail, but I'm actually adding light. There is some light hitting the petal there. So that's like to me, is more of a smaller blocking area. But honestly, I think the line between those is so blurred, it's really difficult to say, and I'm just gonna get myself into trouble if I tried too hard to answer that question. I guess if I'm blocking in a small area, I'm more thinking about trying to create form. And if I'm doing a detail, then even that's an unsatisfactory answer, though, I feel. Difficult question to answer that. Sorry, I tried. I tried and failed. I think possibly they're the same thing. Maybe. Like adding gradually smaller areas is like, is possibly the same thing, is it, as adding detail? In Harold Speed's book, I think it's the one about painting. He wrote two, one about drawing, one about painting. I think it's the one about painting. He shows you an example in a Vermeer painting in this painting by Vermeer, there is a painting by Vermeer on the wall, but it's at an earlier stage. And you can see how much he simplified things. See, I think this is too light. It's certainly strong. Let's try just... But I put that paint on so thick. If I try to pull it around now, I'm just going to have to soften it and then re-harden some areas. I'll soften all of that. But I still want hard edge here. Oh, no, not what we wanted. So you can see it, this painting on this Vermeer painting, it's like you get to see his actual painting finished with a painting that looks like it's at an earlier stage. I mean, it's obviously you don't know because you're reading into what he's trying to show in the painting. That's better. He's really simplified all of the values. Everything is extremely carefully painted still, but he's simplified it into large value blocks. I'm messing this up. I'm losing the background. I think I better live with that. And then you can see, then you look at his actual painting, and it's still very simplified if you look at it really closely, but it's just simplified into much smaller areas. So I think it's kind of the same thing. Detail and painting smaller areas. That was an extremely good question. I like being made to think. See this is an example, right? This form at the moment, it stops where it meets this one. But this petal actually is in front of this one. So I need this to cross over in front of this one, and that's going to show the form more. It's going to clarify the form relationship of these two petals, but hopefully I'm going to be able to use the stroke to just to make it like a beautiful stroke as well. So I'm trying to show the form and paint a detail at the same time, and keep the stroke, you know, as a in itself to be like calligraphically a nice stroke. The question is, does the painting need another session? I'm unsure at this point. Maybe more on the glass, maybe not. But it's in a nice, I kind of feel like the relationship between the flower and the glass is in a nice place at the moment. It's just, I like things that are just suggested. In fact, I think I get a kick out of just suggesting things and just seeing how little I can get away with. It's almost, it's a bit of an obsession really. Like, how little can I get away with and have it still look like it's actually there? And I think that works particularly well for glass because you can see through it anyway, and then you have to make up the rest yourself. Mighty, yes, I am working on landscapes. I've shared very little of my landscape stuff so far, but I am working on some at the moment. The angled brush you use for the fine lines, what is it called? That would probably be this one, the angled eclipse, 1/2 inch angled eclipse from Rosemary's. So you can kind of, you know, you can get them quite flat, so you can get a bit of paint on the end like this, and it gets pretty flat, and then you can just kind of touch it on to make these very fine. So I'm not actually painting a line, I'm just touching it on. I'm very sorry to hear that, Maita. Gillian says, have you ever painted forget-me-nots? Yes, with daffodils, a long time ago. It's probably on Pinterest or Google Images or something. Yeah, but if you mean this one that's got this shape like this, that I did these kind of strokes with, that is a dagger. You can get lots of, I'm going to get some more daggers because I really like the shape. It's really useful for just for some things, particularly daffodils. Wow, Jennifer. Thank you. So Helen says, will you varnish this when you finish it or leave it? I will varnish it. Well, it depends. I mean, sometimes if I sell them, I send them out without varnishing because you've got to wait months. Some of the paint is quite thick here, so I'd have to give it a few months before I could varnish it. But like the commission that I've done, it's been sitting here in the studio for about 4 or 5 months now, and it's ready to varnish. Chacon says, when do you know a painting is finished? That is the question. You just don't. You just don't. You know, I could come back in a couple of days and like obliterate a lot of this and then paint it again. Some of it I'm happy with, but you know, I know that it can be improved, some of it. So I would actually really like to work on this again. I think I like the strokes and I like the feeling of it, but I'm not happy. You know, some areas here need to be clarified, I think, a little bit. So this is more about establishing how the whole thing feels and I will be inclined to go back in and work on this some more. Hello, Cindy. Good to see you. Moody, yeah, that's a good word for it. Atmospheric, moody, ethereal. That's what we're after today. Michelle says, brush is down now for me. You were painting along, cool. Yeah, I think a brush is down for me too. How long we've been going? About an hour and a half. I think that's a pretty good start. There's some stuff in here that I would definitely like to keep. The difficulty is going back in on a painting like this is it's got something about it now that I like. And sometimes I find anyway, this happens to me, like I go back in on a painting, I think I just need to resolve a few things. And then suddenly I end up losing the thing that I liked about it. So it's hard to say. Sit on it for a day or two, Linda says. I agree. Janice says, do you have sessions on glass? Funny you should say that. Have literally just finished a workshop. Here was one of the paintings that we did in the workshop. How to suggest something without actually painting it all, right? That was a workshop called Mastering the Magic, where we painted various kind of things, tricky things like patterned fabric and light and shadow, ceramic and light and shadow. Where's that other one? We did the last session on it. Oh, I don't know where it's gone. On last Wednesday. But I am going to put together, for that one we did, in 6 weeks we did 5 paintings. So one of the paintings was done in 2 sessions. And the next workshop I'm going to do probably, I think 7 sessions, but 3 paintings. So 2 of the paintings will have 2 sessions on them and 1 will have 3. Because there's things that you can do with paint in multiple sessions that you can't get out of a single session painting. And vice versa, but I want to be able to show people the possibilities of glazing and scumbling. Balsam Art, you're very welcome. And thank you. Thanks, Elizabeth. I'm glad you enjoyed it. We got more coming soon. I'm itching. I'm going to go and get a whole new bunch of stuff from my local antiques emporium, where I get all of them, the subjects for the workshops. And they had a particularly amazing copper vase that I want to put into the next workshop, and a huge French confit pot, which I think will make an amazing 3-session painting. So yeah, I've already got the subjects in mind for that one. It's basically the same kind of thing. Making paint create the impression of something, whether it be glass or silver or, mastering the magic. What can you create with paint? See, I think this needs more form. I think it needs a little bit more form. From a distance, overall, I feel like it's got a nice feel to it. But I will definitely leave this one stand and very possibly go back in and completely mess it up another day. Honestly, don't ever use retouch varnish. It's not good. It's not good. It's very brittle and it can delaminate off your painting. Have a look at the best what's it called? Painting Best Practices group on Facebook. And have a search for retouch varnish on there. I know a lot of people do use it, and I have myself in the past, but I won't anymore. I've read too many scary things about it. Matthew says, I think being an artist is just an excuse to buy more fun stuff. Totally. That's the best thing. The amount of collection of little tools that I've got these days that I use on my paintings is like... it's getting a bit silly, but you can create brilliant things with more texture and more layers. This is one actually from another workshop. This is going to have another layer on it yet, I think. It's a little bit sunk in now. But, with texture, you can create some really interesting and beautiful effects, I think. High value, low chroma yellow is tricky. Yeah, all the yellows are tricky. Thank you, Marcia. Glad you're enjoying it. Okay, it's time for me to sign off now. I hope you all have a lovely weekend. I do plan to be back next Friday. I think I'm having a break from teaching next week. I don't think I've got anything planned. I'll have to check the schedule. And I will let you know if you're on my email list. The link is in the description if you're not and you want to subscribe to the email list, which is a good way to hear about like what workshops I've got coming up and that kind of thing. And I've also, actually, since we're doing a flower painting today, and it's the flower season for painting, they're all coming out here in the Cotswolds. I'm also I haven't sent out an email yet, so this is hot off the press, but I'm going to run a 50% discount on my Blooming Brushes course bundle, which is 5 different courses to help you paint flowers. It's normally like $530 because there's a lot in there. 4 courses on flower painting and 1 course on taking your own reference photos, camera settings and how to set them up and light them, all that kind of thing. So it's $530, but it's $265 for the next 3 days. So on Monday, the sale, the coupon expires. Let me put the thing in. Let me put the link in the chat. I'm dribbling on about it, and I haven't put a link in. So that is basically the best of my online teaching that I have for learning to paint flowers. A lot to do with simplifying the form, like everything that went into this one, really, simplifying the form and more besides. Texture, painting in multiple layers. I think that link should work. So for the next 3 days, up until 12 a.m. on Monday, I think, that's all going to be half price. Little sale, a little Easter sale. So you can grab some courses for cheap. Okay. Happy Easter, everybody. Thank you for coming. Hope you enjoyed the session. And I'll see you all again soon. Bye for now.